Hi all and welcome or welcome back to The Books Are Everywhere. Today you join me as I take a look back on 2023 and look forward into the new year while we enjoy some beautiful scenery from my first run of the year and a really beautiful morning walk. 2023 was a big year for me personally, but it did have a lot of ups and downs. It was full of some really amazing trips, such as my first visit to Scotland with Mark back in February, a few trips down to London, a visit to the Lake District in May, and going to Hay-on-Wye for their book festival. Yet another trip in June to Scotland with Courtney, including going to Edinburgh and Glasgow both for the first time. A few trips to Wales, a visit to Bristol for the Hot Air Balloon Festival in August with my mom, and then later in the year a visit to Paris and to Disneyland with Mark, which was such a lovely experience. And also a very unexpected first visit to America in September with Mark, which was so amazing and also allowed me to see one of my favourite bands on their summer tour, All American Rejects. I never thought that trip would go ahead when I started 2023. It was such an unexpected trip, and I just think it's really a reminder of how your year can change and you can never really truly plan for what might happen in the year ahead. And it's one of the reasons that I don't really set goals and resolutions, because things can change and things can happen, and I never expected a year ago that I would have been going to America in September, and I did. Talking of the start of 2023, I went into the new year last year a few months into a temporary role with the same company that I was already working with as a bookseller. My year with work also involved a lot of ups and downs, especially as I started the year in a temporary position. I was quite lucky that I had my bookseller role to go back to if I wasn't successful in keeping my role permanently, but my bookseller job did have significantly less pay and significantly less hours, didn't really offer me the most security going forward. I had a lot of anxiety about my job throughout the year, especially as my temporary contract was extended in March and then in July, and I never really felt that job security. In the summer I applied for a permanent position within the same department I work in now, and in September I was successful. Since then I've been in a new permanent role within my department, helping to manage and support the teams. This role is very rewarding and fulfilling, and I do genuinely love it, but it can also be really stressful and really challenging. Although I had 2 part-time jobs on top of doing my 3rd year of my degree in university, and I worked throughout my entire degree, I do genuinely feel like having one stressful full-time job has impacted me more outside of work, and I have seen that this year. I've definitely seen my reading go down this year, as well as I have completely stopped doing my blog, and I've really been struggling to find the time to create videos and photos for social media and for YouTube. One of my goals for this year is definitely to make sure that I have more time for myself, to get back to doing the things that I love, including reading and creating videos for you. I also had a really big year outside of work with some really exciting things happening in 2023, including moving out of my parents' home. Although I have actually lived without them and moved out before, this felt different. It felt like a more final move for me, especially as I was joined by my brother and we both now live together. Having a house to look after has always been really good for me and my brain, as well as having other responsibilities in my life. Our house is really beautiful and gives us such a nice level of independence, as we're also not far from our parents, and this has just been such an exciting opportunity for both me and my brother. I also faced some personal challenges and changes in 2023, with some family health trouble towards the end of the year. I found new friends in the year, I grew apart from old friends and grew closer again. I had my full-time job, I have my house, a partner, and a life outside of work. I've always struggled with anxiety, and I've had both high and low points throughout the year with my mental health, as we all always do. I have to admit, I'm not really a big fan of the new year in general. I always feel like it puts pressure on us all to look back on the year that we've had and make plans for the next. Especially now with social media, we often find ourselves comparing our years to other people's, and often we are comparing to other people's highlights. Although I had the most amazing, often unexpected 2023 in terms of travel, moving out, and getting a promotion at work, I also want to be honest that it wasn't without its challenges. We often forget that behind other people's photos of their holidays, travel, days out, and trips is still the challenges and difficulties that we all face. Despite the fact that I had a truly amazing year, I also struggled to put myself first, look after myself, and deal with my own stress and anxieties. I honestly believe that the new year is just another day, another week, another month. I often find that January is very difficult for me as I look ahead to the next year, and this is largely due to the pressure that I feel to make big plans and achieve them. This year, I'm trying my hardest to take that pressure off. We can make plans and resolutions at any time of the year, and they can change and adapt. That's okay. If you don't do something in January or make plans in January, the rest of the year is always there waiting for you. You can start something new and exciting at any time of the year. I didn't make any resolutions this year. I have some ideas of things that I would like to do and places that I would like to go, but mainly I want to make sure that I'm doing things for me. I want to get back into doing the things I love, creating videos for you to watch, and also getting back to really making time for reading. Which brings me on to the books. I thought it would also be a really nice time to take you through some of my bookish stats of 2023, including all of the books that I read and some goals of 2024. Hi everyone, I hope you enjoyed that slow start to this video. I really wanted to take some time to properly reflect on the year that I've had and just kind of set me up for the next year and for really making this time for myself to focus on the things that I want to focus on. And we are now going to look back on my reading of the last year, which, as I said in the last section of this video, did really take a nosedive, especially towards the end of the year when I was having some more anxiety around some family health trouble that was kind of really affecting me, as well as it being the most stressful point in the year of my job, it being really busy, and that taking up a lot of my mental kind of space and energy and time. I did really struggle, especially towards the last few months of the year, to fit proper time in for reading, and I am feeling so excited about the new year, being able to actually focus on myself more, focus on my reading more, and get more time in to fit some of these books into my life. So I'm going to use a mixture of Storygraph and my own spreadsheet and a tiny bit of Goodreads. Although I try not to really talk about it anymore, I do privately still track my reading on Goodreads as well as using Storygraph. So I'm going to show you, I think it's the easiest way to show you like all of the books that I actually read the last year, so that's what we're going to start with doing. Then we'll look at my stats on my own spreadsheet on Storygraph. So let's firstly take a look at every single book I read last year. I won't talk about these obviously individually. I read 107 books in 2023, which is still just an amazing amount, even though I took a bit of a nosedive at the end of the year. Reading over 100 books for me is really good, and I'm really pleased with that. So this is how I kicked off my year. And then these are the books that I went on to read. As I said, I'm not going to talk you through this. Let's just have a little bit of a scroll through all of the books that I read in 2023. It's crazy to look back on these and think I read them only last year. Some of them feel like yesterday, some of them feel like I read them years ago. Feel like I had a real mix of genres in here. And I did try and focus on getting some of my older reads off my TBR, although there is still a lot of newer books in here that I really enjoyed as well. We are getting into October now and towards the end of the year, and we end here. with the top few being read in December. Okay, now we're going to jump over to Storygraph and my Storygraph stats, which I haven't actually looked at all, so this is going to be super interesting. So I'm just going to acknowledge that it says on Storygraph I read 106 books, whereas on Goodreads it says I read 107. I think Goodreads is probably slightly more accurate than Storygraph, although I'm not 100% sure what that missing book is, and I cannot be bothered to find out. So this is what we're dealing with. Apparently I read 106 according to Storygraph. So let's go through and see what it says. Apparently I read 34,957 pages, and it's given me this pie chart, which I find really interesting because the way Storygraph kind of catalogues things I find just quite funny. Like, some of the things in here I would never think to like categorise, like informative. I read one informative book. I'm wondering what that is. Firebird. Find them really random sometimes. Read a lot of emotional books, 46, which does not surprise me at all. I read 40 light-hearted books. I was really like on the fence between emotional and light-hearted. 39 adventurous books, 35 mysterious, 26 funny, 18 hopeful, 18 dark. I really wonder what these are, so I'm just going to quickly scroll through and see. I can see where most of these are coming from. There is some really dark reads in here. 15 tense, 11 reflective, 4 inspiring, 3 sad, 2 relaxing, 2 challenging, and 1 informative. The 2 challenging, interesting. Some of these are... not that I necessarily wouldn't put them there, but it's just interesting to see what other people categorise things as more than anything else. Which were my sad books? I can see that. And my 4 inspiring books. I can also see, but I felt like I could categorise more books as inspiring. This is my reflective. Interesting that a few of these are graphic novels, especially at the top there. Oh, Maybe in Another Life was just incredible. Interesting. So that is my pie chart from Storygraph. I also have a pace pie chart, so I read mostly medium books with some fast and 6 slow books. I read mostly 300 to 499 page books. I only read 4 over 500 this year, and I read 35 that were less than 300 pages. I read 4 non-fiction books and 102 fiction books, and these are the genres that I covered. We have a lot of genres here. I don't really count young adult as a genre, I count it as an age category more than anything else, although obviously there is not an age on what you read. I don't believe that that is true. I believe that anyone can read children's books and can read young adult books. Obviously there's going to be a lot of adult books that are not suitable for children, but the other way around I believe is true. So really my top genre in my head is contemporary, romance, fantasy, LGBT, historical, thriller. Interesting that historical and thriller are so up there. I'm interested in what my 12 historical books are, because I don't really read a lot of historical or enjoy a lot of historical. So even a lot of these are kind of historical fantasy, rather than just like historical books. Thriller, mystery, middle grade, graphic novels. Again, middle grade I wouldn't really think of as a genre, but it's okay. Science fiction, crime, classics, memoir, literary, horror, dystopian, children's, short stories, magical realism, psychology. I can see that. Manga. I definitely read more. I thought I read more than just that last year, but maybe not. Comics. Okay, I think I read more than that last year in the way of comics, but that's fine. And then we have my tags, which are probably a bit all over the place and not very helpful. Again, format, I definitely listen to more than one audiobook, but I probably don't categorise them as audio on Storygraph, so that won't be accurate. I also have this most read authors, which I feel like is really interesting because most of these is because they are part of a series, and I think that's natural that they would go to the top of my like most read list. Do also have 4 Agatha Christie books, which is good because I have a whole Agatha Christie set I am working through. Then I read all of the books, including the like novella in the Good Girls Guide to Murder series, so that's 4. I read the, what's it called? Deadly Education series, that was 3. I read, what did I read that was, oh yeah, these books. The Starbound series, so that's also 3. Julie Murphy, I read Pudding, Pumpkin, and yeah, one of her Christmas books that she writes with Sierra Simone. Ali Hazelwood's there, B. Schwab's there, Kay O'Neill is there, Laura Wood and Jenny Han all at 2. Then I found this chart super interesting as well, how my reading really dropped after like July. It seems like it's steadily just got less throughout the rest of the year, but then also stayed at like a kind of flat line. So it was really interesting. Naturally, I read the most in June because that's when me and Courtney went away, and we always read a lot when we go away together. We go on like a little reading holiday. So I do find that really interesting, and like just normally the pages and the books are really close. So I read 10 books and 3,133 pages last January, but then there is quite a difference between February, so I must have read some short books in February, and then they stay really close for the rest of the year. But it is interesting to see the kind of drop throughout the year as well. And then my star ratings, I definitely think I would have rated all of the books I read, so I'm not sure why it's only 98. But my average was 3.89. I like that Storygraph rates, you can rate in like half stars. I don't use the quarter stars, but I do use the halves. So we have 3 coming in at 2.5 stars. Do we want to know what they are? Well, that does not surprise me, to be honest, that 2 of them are from that series. Then we have 18 3 stars, 16 3.5 stars, 37 4 stars, only 9 4.5 stars, and 15 5 stars, which I'm interested to see what they are. Oh, I love this book. Obviously I loved all of these books because they are my 5-star reads of the year, but I love these. I love that Alpha's in here too. I can't believe that I reread Clockwork Angel last year. That seems like so long ago. So that is all of my Storygraph stats. I think now it's time to go to my spreadsheet, which I will admit I didn't keep up to date with as much as I wanted to, but I kept the most important things to me up to date, and like at the end of the year I went through and I updated everything that I was missing in terms of all of the books that I read throughout the year and things like that. I really wanted to make sure I had on that sheet, so I'm going to show you that next. Okay, so this is my main part of the sheet that I want to show you, which is my bookish stats for the year. This is kind of created from my list of reads, which I log all of these things and then they go over to my bookish stats page. This is still a template that I use from Reader Voracious, and I will link it down below. I just changed the one that I had from the last year and edit it for the new year, so I'm probably on like, I think I'm on 2022's version. Don't know if there's a new one for this year, but I will link the one that I use down below, or the main blog, so you can get to find one that you want to use. But I think using a tweaked version of 2022's version. Firstly, we have reading by age range. So I had 49 adult books, only 2 new adult, but I'm really bad at categorising things as new adult, 44 young adult, and 10 middle grade and 2 children's. Then by release, so I think in age range, I think I have actually read more adult books this year than another, like the balance between adult and young adult is definitely changing over the years. And then we have books by release, so 51 of them were backlist. I think that means that they would be older than a year. I'm not 100% sure. 27 new, which I think would mean like published in that year, in the most recent year. 44 I read were ARCs, but that makes me sound better than I am, because a lot of those have probably been sat on my shelves for a while. I just received them from the publisher. And then only one reread, which I guess would have been Clockwork Angel. Books by genre, I find this really interesting. So on here, obviously we can kind of compare this to Storygraph as well. I had 15 contemporary, 28 fantasy, 13 graphic novel, 4 historical, or there's horror in there as well, 1 horror, 2 literary fiction, 3 memoir, 5 mystery, 18 romance, 9 sci-fi and 9 thriller. I am kind of surprised that there's still 28 fantasy books in here. I feel like my fantasy reading has kind of dropped off, but that's probably especially towards the end of 2023. And if you combined contemporary and romance, that would obviously be higher. I did think that that would be higher than fantasy, and I guess if you combine them it would be, but that is interesting to see. Obviously the year on this is incorrect, let's change that to 2023, but my reading by source, so I bought a lot of my books, so I'm trying to get it to show me the amount. So I bought 43 of my books. 43 and 44 of them were from the publisher, 4 of them were borrowed and 12 of them were gifted to me. In format, this is a lot more accurate in terms of which I read on audio. I read 17 audiobooks, 19 hardcover, 67 in paperback and 4 on ebooks. I was especially reading ebooks when I went to America. I did try and read a few on my Kindle, so I didn't take physical books with me. And then this should be the same, I guess, as Storygraph. So I presume it's around the same. So I had 2 2.5 stars, 21 3 stars. I feel like this is slightly out, but this is probably slightly more accurate. So 22 3.5 stars, 38 4 stars, 11 4.5 stars and 13 5 stars. So I think maybe I changed a few of those 5 stars down to 4.5, which is interesting. Don't think this counts properly, so let's ignore those. And my ARCs I have not kept up with this year. Publisher type I find really interesting. So I read 73 from the big 5 publishers, 33 from indie but just publishers outside of the big 5, and 1 self-published book. And then how I heard about my reads I also find really interesting. So 13 of them were from social media, 43 of them were from the author, so I've read from them before. 1 was from a bestseller list, 1 was a recommendation from a bookseller, 8 were browsing, 13 were recommended by friends, and 28 were from publishers. Other than that, I mainly just have a list of all of the books I actually read in 2023 and all of the books that I bought in 2023, including how much they cost, so I get to see how much I spent throughout the year, which is always alarming. I bought 184 books last year, or I bought and received 184, and I've read 49 of those already. One of the things for 2024 is I would definitely like that goal to be higher, that percentage to be higher. I believe the year before I read about 50% of the books that I'd bought or received within that year, which was good, although hopefully this does mean that I read more from my backlist, which is also really good. I'm aware that I've been talking for quite a while. I am just quickly going to take you through some of my loose goals for 2024. As I said, I don't really have like set resolutions or plans, but there are a few things just in my head that I do want to do in the next year, and some of those are obviously related to reading. I have set my goal for the year as 100 books again. I feel like that's fairly achievable for me and doesn't put too much pressure on me, but also feels like a big number and a nice number to aim towards. So I've put it as 100, I think, for the 3rd year in a row this year. I would like to get this TBR down. It's the highest it's ever been, and it's been climbing for over a year now, and probably well over a year, and I would really like to see it actually go down rather than up. even if that's just by a few, and I would like to focus more on actually trying to achieve that this year because I have so many books. I would also, as I have said throughout this video, I would like to really keep on top of reading for me, picking books out for me and making that time, carving that time for myself. And I'd also like to focus more on doing YouTube again and doing more social media again. I would like to get back into writing book reviews and doing the blog. I have neglected the blog for the last like 7 or 8 months, and I haven't written a review in such a long time, and I would quite like to get back to doing that this year because it's just something that I enjoy having for my own kind of personal archive. So it would be nice to just get back to having those reviews for all of the books that I read. And I would also like to do a better job in keeping track of what I read in 2024. I've got my spreadsheet all set up and I am so far with the 2 books, 1 book that I finished and another that I'm currently reading. I do have those on the sheet, and I would like to kind of like keep track of everything a little bit better because that is something else that I was neglecting a bit when I didn't have the time in 2023. So that is everything. I think that brings me to the end of my reflection on the year, looking into the new year and looking towards 2024 and some of my goals. So I think that's everything. I will love you and leave you now. I hope you've enjoyed being back with me for this video. I'm aware that it's been quite long, but I'm really glad that I've managed to kind of look back on the year and look forward to the new year. Let me know what your thoughts are on resolutions, whether you have any plans for the new year, and I hope you will continue this journey with me throughout the next year. It is a pleasure to have you with me as always, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.